Just 1 month ago, before the world went on lockdown, Scream 5 was given a projected filming date as early as May. Considering no official cast or writer has been announced, we have to assume they already have all of that sorted out. So watch through to the end of this video to find out exactly what they're not telling us, and more details on what Scream 5's plot could actually be about. What is up, my Scream team? Zach Cherry here. Guys, I started this channel because I'm a huge horror geek, and if you're like me, you might want to consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the notification bell so that YouTube can let you know the moment I drop a new video. Shout at me in the comments down below to let me know what your hopes are for the new Scream movie, and just for shits and gigs, give this video a thumbs up and share it with all your friends. Your continued support and viewership is what gives me the motivation to grind out new content for you guys on a regular basis. Getting right into the nitty gritty here, we've recently learned that Spyglass Media Group has secured Radio Silence Productions' Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett to co-direct Scream 5 together. Along with that news, we also learned that Kevin Williamson would be coming on board as an executive producer. Now, this has been a very overlooked detail, as nobody really cares who's executive producing a movie. People are more concerned with the writer and director roles, as they're the flashier titles who typically receive all the glory, while the producers just collect paychecks. But that's not always the case, as the executive producer does have a lot of creative control. And in regards to Kevin Williamson, this is something that he's never really had when it came to the Scream franchise. This has been a point of contention and certainly created a bit of behind-the-scenes turmoil for Scream 3, and to a much larger extent on Scream 4, which was embroiled in some tumultuous production issues involving creative differences between Williamson and then executive producer Bob Weinstein. There are a lot of different rumors floating around out there over what went down, but Williamson candidly spoke about his experience on Scream 4, including his fight with Bob Weinstein, and the gist of it is that he wrote a script for them, which was the first chapter in a new trilogy, which would have seen a succession of sequels, with him writing Scream 5 and 6 as well. Even though Weinstein blindly agreed to this and put his faith in Williamson's ability without really hearing his pitch, at the end of the day, he had some notes and wanted to make a few changes that would have altered the planned trajectory of this hypothetical new trilogy. At the time, Williamson was contractually obligated to his work on the Vampire Diaries and wouldn't have had the opportunity to work on these rewrites, which Weinstein demanded. So much to his chagrin, he left production after a heated argument, forcing Weinstein to find someone else to do the rewrites. Now, what happened next may be salt in the wound for Williamson, but they ended up hiring Aaron Kruger, who was already responsible for writing Scream 3, so yeah. And just a brief history lesson with Scream 3, Williamson was also busy with other projects at the time that sequel had been greenlit and could only submit a 30-page outline, which was scrapped altogether by Weinstein in favor of Kruger's more generic and comical script. And seeing how Scream 3 turned out, you would think that they'd have learned their lesson with Kruger, that maybe he's not the best fit for this franchise, but not so much. I'm not so sure why Bob Weinstein was so pushy to move forward without Williamson on either of those sequels. It's not like Miramax was about to lose the franchise rights and needed to make another movie fast, but it's always been their impetus to rush these productions, which I personally believe hurt Scream 3 and 4, even though some might disagree with me. But I digress. Williamson bitterly walked away from the franchise after this, having been paid for his script and washing his hands of Weinstein. However, he held on to his story outlines for 5 and 6 and remained hopeful that at some point Weinstein would return to him and make an offer when they were ready to go ahead with the new movie. Unfortunately, Scream 4 performed poorly at the box office, and Wes Craven passed away, so it didn't pan out the way he had hoped. But now, since the Weinsteins are out of the picture and Spyglass has purchased the rights to the franchise, they want to work with Kevin Williamson, and with him taking on that executive producer role, he can finally realize his vision, or at least some version of it. There are some substantial differences in Williams' original script for Scream 4, most notably that Dewey and Gale have a much smaller role in the story, giving more focus to Sydney and the younger characters. But the biggest difference, which completely alters the story, and presumably the reason Williamson was so perturbed, is that the entire hospital scene at the end of the movie never actually existed in his script and was added on by Kruger. Williamson's version originally ended with Dewey and Gale showing up at Kirby's house to find Jill alive, and while the media arrives and Jill gets ready to put on her act, one of the officers calls calls out to Dewey to let him know that they found another survivor who's female, and the movie ends there, on a cliffhanger. So we don't find out if the survivor is Sydney or Kirby, which I should make a point to say that while they both appear to be mortally wounded, neither of them are confirmed dead in the script. I can understand why Weinstein wouldn't want to sign off on that idea, as it's a risky move. Cliffhangers in movies weren't really a thing back in 2011. Williamson was obviously a little ahead of his time with this script, because the MCU has now shown us that people do love movie cliffhangers, and obviously the horror genre has gotten on board with them as well with the Halloween Kills trilogy. If Scream 4 had never been made and Williamson pitched his idea today, this trilogy would 100% go through. But seeing as how the canonical ending of the movie now negates his proposed trilogy, he would most definitely need to recalibrate his story. But of course, that's only contingent on whether or not he's providing the script for Scream 5, and at this point, that information hasn't been revealed. However, we were told that this movie was going to begin filming in May at the earliest. With the current state of the world, that won't be happening on schedule, but the fact that they never announced a writer is very peculiar to me. Typically, the first piece of movie production news that you hear about is the writer, and that comes months to almost a year in some cases before principal photography, as said writer needs to write a screenplay. Not to mention the fact that we have no cast announcement either. If Scream 5 was slated to shoot in May, who and what would they even be working with? Obviously, at this point, they have a script and they have a partial cast, and it's all being kept extremely well under wraps. But since Williamson has had the story in his back pocket for the last 9 years, he's probably had time to repurpose the script to match the ending of Scream 4, while still using the elements of his original outline. If that's the route they're going, then the script is good to go, and judging by the timeline with the rumors of the big three all being in negotiations to return, which we heard about back in December, as well as having the directors now attached, if a prospective filming date had been slated for May, they pretty much have all their ducks in a row. And with Williamson as an executive producer, he's not going to run into as much interference if they are indeed working with his script. So what this can tell us is, yes, this will be a continuation of Scream 4. Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette will all be coming back. We don't know in what capacity, but it looks very promising. And maybe, cannot speculate for sure, that Hayden Panettiere will also be returning, and could quite possibly be the star of the film, which would indicate that Kirby is the character that was referenced in the Scream 5 plot outline that we heard last month, about a woman returning to her hometown to try to find out who's been committing a series of vicious crimes. If Kirby was the mystery survivor in the cliffhanger of Williamson's original script for Scream 4, the plan for the next movie might have seen Kirby suspecting that the true killer was never apprehended, trying to figure out who it is and not realizing that it's her best friend Jill, as Kirby never actually got to bear witness to Jill's reveal, having been left for dead outside of the house. Obviously, this would have to involve a new killer, as Jill looked pretty dead at the end of Scream 4. But whether this will be an accomplice to Jill's killing spree or just a new killing spree altogether, there will certainly be a connecting thread to the last movie. Kirby was one of the best newly written characters after the original movie, if not the best. I think Hayden Panettiere has the charisma to pull it off, and I would love to watch that. Like I've said before, I am 100% willing to eat crow if this is not in fact what this movie is. I know that a lot of people are adamant that this is strictly going to be a reboot, but it is still within the context of being rebooted, as we would just be switching gears, going from Sydney to having Kirby take on the mantle of being the final girl. And honestly, I'm very satisfied by that direction. It's almost like going from Laurie Strode to Jamie Lloyd. You've got a character just as compelling and likable to lead the series in new directions with new stories. Guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and be sure to leave your questions and comments. Just don't be a garbage person about it. I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.